How many articles are there in the Constitution? Somebody guess. 7. Lisa doesn't need to guess. She just knows that stuff. There are 7. So let's talk about them. Not necessarily one at a time, because the last 4 or 5, 3 are like, we'll clump them together. But Article 1, wicked, super important article. Otherwise, it wouldn't be Article 1. Article 1 establishes the legislative branch. It's where all the legislative power of Congress is found. What is Congress? The House of Representatives and the Senate. When you're talking about Congress, it's both of those together. So Congress is bicameral. So it's a camera with 2 lenses, right? What's bicameral mean? 2 houses. It's a 2-house legislature. A 2-house legislature. The House and the House of Representatives and the Senate. It also, Article 1 sets out the qualifications for holding office. Like how you get elected and stuff. It also sets term limits. If you are elected, if you are elected to the United States House of Representatives, how long is your term? You're half right. 2 years. 2 years. What happens after 2 years? Can you run again? Mm-hmm. Is there any limit as to how many times you can run? No. Do you all remember a guy named Nick Rahal? A lot of West Virginians say Nicholas Joseph Rahal. He was like the elected House of Representatives member from Southern West Virginia for like 32 years. He won like 16 elections in a row. Okay? He doesn't, not anymore. He's not our representative anymore, but he was. So there's no limit as to how many terms a representative could serve. Okay? What about Senate? If you are elected to the United States Senate from your state, how long do you serve? 6 years. Extremely, very good, Nikki. You serve a 6-year term. 6-year term. Have you ever heard of a man by the name of Robert C. Byrd? Yeah, like Robert C. Byrd. Like our school should probably be named Robert C. Byrd. He grew up in Stokesbury. Do you guys know where that is? Yeah. Like Sophia. Like he would have went to your school, okay, if it existed when he was old. But Stokesbury gets consolidated into Stokoe, and then Stokoe and Sophia become independent. So he would have been an independence patriot. And he won like 10 elections at 6 years per election. He was a senator for a very long time. He was one of the most powerful men in America. In fact, he was like 3rd in line to the presidency, because he was the president pro tempore of the Senate for like 40 years. Okay, and he was a West Virginian. Now, there's only 2 senators per state, but how many House of Representatives members does each state have? Depends on the population. Very good. And all of this information is found in Article 1. You can read it. It's literally black and white, word for word. You can see it. All right?
Why do senators get to serve longer than House?
It's just the way they established it. And also, it's like each election will be in alternating years. So it kind of falls. So that it's called midterm elections. So that the majority of the House of Representatives members will be elected in the middle year of a president's election. So like in one more year it'll be midterm elections for a lot of House of Representatives members, and then because it's the middle of the president's term, and then 2 years later the president is elected, and then there'll be another election as well. So So it's just kind of staggered like that to keep things, I don't want to say off kilter, but kind of to try to keep it fair. Try to keep it fair. Okay. All right. Article 1 also talks about like the census, because if it talks about the House of Representatives, we have to talk about the census to have a number of the citizenry taken every 10 years. It's in the Constitution. It has to be done. So even in 2020, in the midst of a global pandemic, the census happened. It is constitutional. One of the most important sections of Article 1 is called Article 1, Section 8. Article 1, Section 8. This article, this section, is also known as the enumerated powers. The enumerated powers. These are the powers that are specifically granted to Congress. Meaning they're literally written down and numbered. That's why they're called enumerated. They are numbered. And it consists of like 17 powers. They're just straight up written in there. And these are the powers that only Congress has. West Virginia doesn't have them. The president doesn't have them. Only Congress has them. Like the power to declare war, the power to tax. Well, states can tax too, obviously. The power to create a post office. There's no West Virginia's Postal Service. It's the United States Postal Service. The power to coin and regulate money, interstate trade, foreign affairs. All of those things are only granted to Congress. And it's all written down, word for word. To create an army and navy, all written down, word for word, in Article 1, Section 8. The enumerated powers. All right? Are those the only powers that Congress has? Is that the only thing they can do? They can do other stuff? They can. And there's another clause in Article 1. It's called the Necessary and Proper Clause.
What?
The Necessary and Proper Clause. It's Santa's cousin, you know. Oh, thank you. Necessary and Proper Clause. We call it the Elastic Clause. They didn't call it that because they didn't know what elastic was. We call it elastic because what is a property of elastic? It stretches. Just like my pants. Fortunately, they have elastic so they can stretch with me. Yeah, especially after the trips to the China One and Golden Corral, right? Got to have those elastic pants. So why would we call this clause elastic? I mean, it's just like some words. What do you think it allows Congress to do? It allows them to kind of stretch. It allows them to cover things that are not necessarily written down in the enumerated powers. For example, just a very simple example. Now, this is not a great example because speed limits. What's the speed limit on the interstate? 70, unless there's road work and stuff. 70. What was the speed limit on the interstate in 1789? Well, there was no speed limit because there were no cars and there were no interstate. But now there's laws that say that there's speed limits. Enumerated. Does it say anywhere in the Constitution that Congress can regulate speed limits? No. Is it necessary to have a speed limit? Yes. Is it proper? Hey, if it's necessary and proper, then Congress can do it. Elastic. It's elastic. Does that make sense? I don't think I could explain that any better. You got that? So really, whenever Congress makes a law, all laws are necessary, needed, and appropriate. They're proper. Okay? So this necessary and proper clause is the basis for implied powers. Implied powers. And it's great. Congress can do things. It's not always been great. This is like one of the greatest arguments in American history. Can we do this? Is it okay? If you remember back, there were two gentlemen at the beginning of America who had vast amounts of disagreements as to the role of government and the nature of what government can do. And they fought with each other and had a great amount of political rivalry. Do you know those two guys? Thomas Jefferson? Good guess. Alexander Hamilton. Alexander Hamilton wanted to create something. He make bank. He wants to make a bank. Where in the Constitution does it say that Alexander Hamilton can make a bank? It does not. So Thomas Jefferson says, if it's not in there, you can't do it. And Alexander Hamilton says, whoa, whoa, whoa. It's necessary and proper. We need to do this. And this is, even to this day, this is a constant. The implied powers has created an environment where people can disagree with one another over the role of government, and it's as old as it's as old as America. This clause, the implied powers, has been a source of disagreement. Now, it doesn't mean it's going to lead to the downfall of our nation. We seem to be doing a good job of that on our own. Okay. Article 1. You guys got Article 1. Nailed it, right? Nailed it. Establishes the legislative branch and all the things that it can do. Who's super smart and can tell me what Article 2 does? The executive branch. Article 2 vests power to the executive. That is, gives the executive branch the authority to execute the laws of the nation by establishing an office, not a title, an office known as President of the United States, often commonly referred to simply as POTUS, P-O-T-U-S, POTUS, President of the United States, POTUS. You have probably heard of this position and many of the men who have occupied that office. If you are elected to be President of the United States, how long is your term? 4 years. At the creation of the Constitution, there were no term limits. You could run as many times as you want. However, now we've made changes or amendments to the Constitution, and how many terms can a president serve consecutively now? 2. You get 2 terms. 8 years is the most you can be president, with a few caveats. Okay. All right. So 4-year term, and you get 2 now, but at the time it was unlimited. So this also talks about qualifications. There are certain qualifications that a person has to meet before they can even run for president of the United States. Do you guys know what some of them are? You must be 35 years old. You have to be a natural-born citizen. Natural-born. So what does a natural-born citizen mean? Okay. You don't have to be. You can be born in America, and that would make you a natural-born citizen. What else? One of your parents is an American citizen. So if if your dad is in the military and he's an American and he goes, when he's a young man, he goes to Japan and he's stationed there and he meets a lovely Japanese lady and gets married and has a baby, and you're born in Japan, are you an American citizen? Yeah, because one of your parents is American. You are were you born in America? No. But are you an American? Yes. Okay? So don't think that you have to be born within our boundaries, and that's the only condition of citizenship, as long as your parents are citizens. Okay? Would you also be a citizen of Japan? Yes. That is one instance in which you could have dual citizenship. Now let's say that you want to, you're born in America to American parents, and you say, I hate America, I'm going to live in Japan and apply for citizenship. Can you have dual citizenship then? No. America revokes your citizenship, and you would only become a Japanese citizen. America takes citizenship very seriously, okay? Because there are certain duties and responsibilities that American citizens have, and we take them seriously, all right? Anyway, so you got to be 35, you got to be a natural-born citizen, and you must have lived in the United States for a total of 14 years. You must have been a resident of the United States for at least 14 years. Those are the qualifications for office. Article 2 also describes the mechanism for replacing the president in case of death, disability, or removal from office. Like who takes over? Who takes over if the president can't fulfill the office? Vice president. Anybody know who takes over after that? The Speaker of the House of Representatives. After that, President pro tempore of the Senate. After that, it is the Cabinet Secretaries, Department of Defense, Department of War Department, and then Department of Treasury, and then various departments after that. Yeah. Okay. Also, according to Article 2, the President is required to give one address to the nation every year. What is the name of that speech usually? It's a speech. It's called the State of the Union. You ever heard of it? The President usually gives it in Congress and addresses the entire nation. Traditionally, especially in the era of television, it's a speech. Thomas Jefferson hated giving speeches. He hated speaking, really. He wrote his down and had somebody else read it. But he's required to do that, to give a speech, to address the nation, to talk about the goings-on of our country. What is the state, what is the condition of our union? That's the purpose of the speech, okay? So, questions on that, on the Article 2. It also provides how you remove the president, also known as, or the process of accusing the president of wrongdoing. Impeachment. All right. Article 3 is the only branch left, guys. Judicial branch. What is the highest court in the land in the United States of America? The Supreme Court. The Supreme Court is established, along with other federal national courts, by Article 3. There was a lot of debate over the necessity of having a federal court system, or even desiring it, having some kind of independent judiciary. They just wanted to have local and state courts. But small states feared that a strong, unelected judiciary would trample on their civil liberties. So they wanted to make sure that there would be more checks and balances on the executive and the legislative branch. So, what can a federal court do? What do they do? It's in the Constitution. Tells them exactly what they do. Well, they can listen and hear and decide cases that have to do with federal law. Who makes federal laws? Congress. And anything that has to do with the Constitution. Anything that has to do with the Constitution, this Supreme Court can hear. They can decide on. What if there's a dispute between states? If one state sues another state, guess where that case would be heard? In the Supreme Court. A state court wouldn't be very good, would it? If West Virginia sues Ohio, which court should hear the case? West Virginia's court or Ohio's court? Neither one would be fair. The Supreme Court would be fair. Ultimately, it was up to the Supreme Court to determine what the provisions of the Constitution would actually mean. How do you become a member of the Supreme Court? You are appointed by the president, and it's just instantly, right? You become a Supreme Court justice. Then what? You have to be approved by the Senate. Checks and balances. Now, once you are chosen to the Supreme Court, what is your term? How long do you serve? Life. Or retirement. You can retire. You can quit. But that's it. Once you're in there, you're in there. There's no re-election. There's no reappointment. You can serve, if you're 25 years old and you're appointed, you can serve 75 years until life until you die or retire. Presuming they have good behavior. If you're a criminal, you will be removed, just like any other member of our government. Okay? Questions on these 3 articles so far? Mama? Did you say go to the bathroom? Yeah, go. All right. Now, how many articles are there total? So there's 4 more. Well, I don't have a slide for that. Articles 4 through 7. The remainder of the articles in the Constitution are created to kind of anticipate problems that might occur with the first 3 articles. For example, Article 4 contains another one of Santa's cousins. It's called the Full Faith and Credit Clause. Ever heard of it? It's a vocabulary word. Full Faith and Credit Clause is in Article 4. I'll give you the definition. Any kind of contract or judicial decree made in one state will be binding and enforceable in another state. Just write it, and then I'll give you an example, and you'll be like, oh, okay, I understand. Any kind of judicial decision or contract made in one state will be binding and enforceable in another state. Any kind of contract or court decision in one state will be binding and enforceable in another state. All right. So let's say me and Miss Wood, we're gonna get married eventually, and so we run off to Las Vegas and we get married, and the state of Nevada gives us a marriage certificate, says you are married, and then we come home. Are we still married? But my license says Nevada. Are we still married? Yes. Full faith and credit clause. What happened in Nevada doesn't stay in Nevada. What happened in Vegas doesn't stay there. It comes back with us, and we would be married here. My driver's license says West Virginia. Can I drive in Virginia? Yes, because the contract made, the license served, allows me to use it in other states. Full faith and credit. Other states have to honor what other states do. And that's part of the Constitution. Does that make sense? It's a lot easier to explain it like that than the definition the book gives. Okay? So that was, that's kind of how Article 4 begins. Article 4 also gives how new states are added to the country. Because at the time there were only 13. We got 50 now, so kind of important. And the mechanism for adding new states was stolen from the Articles of Confederation. It's like the only thing the Articles of Confederation did well is because they add new states. They did it with the land ordinances like 1785 and 87. Anyway, we already had it in place. They just added it to the Constitution because it was good. It was good. It's like once a population reaches a certain amount, they can make a state constitution and apply for statehood, and then Congress approves it, and that's the method. All right, Article 5 is the amendment process. What does the word amendment mean?
Make a change.
Changes. How many amendments are there to the United States Constitution currently? Hmm? 20-something? 27. The first 10 were added right off the bat. So it really has only been changed 17 times after that. Okay? So 27 amendments to the Constitution. And Article 5 tells us how to do that. It's the process. Article 6 contains the Supremacy Clause. It says that the Constitution is supreme. What does the word supreme mean? You ever got a supreme pizza?
There's nothing
Nothing better. Nothing above it. It's supreme. It is the highest law in the land. I would think Colorado would have the highest law in the land. But it's the U.S. Constitution is the highest law in the land because of Article 6 and the Supremacy Clause. Okay? All right. So what this means is because of the Supremacy Clause, any kind of legitimate exercise of national powers is going to supersede anything a state does. The federal government is more powerful than any state government. All right? Does that make sense? Article 7 is on ratification. Is that the process by which people turn into Splinter from the Ninja Turtles? Ratification. What's ratification? What does the word ratify mean? Approve. How does it go? How do we go from, hey, it's just 55 white dudes hiding out in Philadelphia coming up with this, to, hey, this is what we're going to do for the entire country? That's Article 7. Ratification, the approval. It's the final article of the Constitution. How many states had to approve it before it became what we're going to do? 9 of 13. 9 of 13 had to agree or ratify before the U.S. Constitution became the supreme law of the land. 9 out of 13 should be no problem, right? It was a struggle. And even those states that did not ratify it, it still happened there. During the debate over whether to ratify the Constitution, two sides emerged. Those who favored the new strong national government, who loved having the idea of a federal government, called themselves Federalists because they wanted a strong federal government. And these were, property owners, rich people, merchants, predominantly in the Northeast and the Mid-Atlantic states. They were elitists. Alexander Hamilton, elitist, thinking that only the wealthy and educated should be in charge of decision-making. They were pro-British and anti-French. And they loved having a powerful central government. Their opponents, whom the Federalists labeled, their opponents, they didn't even name themselves. The Federalists called them Anti-Federalists. So it's like me being like, hey, I'm the good guy, and you guys are the not good guy. And that's the name that sticks with you. Hey, we're the not good guys. That's how it worked. The Anti-Federalists, people who were against a powerful government, powerful federal government. They believed that the power should belong with the majority where? States and the people. All people. Not just property owners, wealthy elites. Okay? So, meetings were held all throughout the states. Tempers ran high at these meetings. A lot of debate, town hall meetings, published in newspapers. And soon, opinion pieces were being published throughout newspapers all over the states. You read one of those papers yesterday. What did you read yesterday? Federalist paper number 10. Okay? And one name stood out of all these people who were publishing these letters. And that name was Publius. Publius. And Publius is a Latin word. It just means people. It means people, like public. That's where the word public comes from. And between October of 1787 and May of 1788, there were 85 essays written under that pen name Publius. And these essays routinely appeared in newspapers in New York, which is a state where ratification was in doubt. New York was not one of the earlier ones to ratify. They were late. And New York, a large state, was important. It was important to get New York to ratify. Two men wrote the majority of these 85 essays. Federalist 10 was written by one of them. Who was that? James Madison. Alexander Hamilton also wrote a significant amount. They both published under the name Publius. So it's not like one of them was Publius and the other one was not. Hamilton actually wrote 51 of them. He wrote more of them than Madison. Madison wrote 26. John Jay wrote 3. But these essays became known as the Federalist Papers. And they were numbered. You guys read number 10. Federalist Paper number 10, for example, argues about calling the new Constitution a remedy for the disease of Republican government. So it's needed. It's necessary. A federal government is necessary to try to prevent evil things from happening, like another rebellion. It's necessary. Now, the Anti-Federalists, it's not like they're a bunch of illiterate hillbillies. They do some writings of their own. And they responded to the Federalist Papers with their own series of writings. And they even also came up with some clever pen names, Brutus and Cato. They were Romans, okay? There were two Romans who were famous for their intolerance for tyranny. What is Brutus known for? Killing Julius Caesar, a tyrant, a powerful, strong, authoritarian figure. And they wrote articles under his name, Brutus, because we're going to kill tyrants. You see it? This is pretty inflammatory language, just by choosing the name Brutus. Like, what did Brutus do? Murder people. Okay? So, the Anti-Federalist kind of took a line-by-line critique of the Constitution and basically said that this strong government is going to take all the power away from the states and therefore all the power away from the people. And that this federal government is going to trample all over us. If they wanted to tax us heavily, they could. There was no stopping them. And that the president would eventually have too much power. The president's in charge of the army, so it's just going to be like a military dictatorship. That's eventually what's going to happen. And they hated the idea of having their liberties trampled by the government. And I don't really blame them. I mean, what were we doing like 10 years before this? Huh? That's right. We were fighting and dying and spilling blood so that we wouldn't have a strong central authority telling us what to do. And now here we are, not long after that, they're going to try to do the same thing to them. And they didn't like it. The Anti-Federalists were against having that strong central authority. Okay? So, what happens? It gets ratified with just easy, right? What's the entire nation, what's the entire Constitution built on? Compromise. And a compromise is had. Now, this debate takes a while. It doesn't, the Constitution is not ratified immediately. There, for about 4 years, anarchy was the rule of government in America. There was none, because we're waiting to ratify this Constitution. So from 1787 to 1788, in accordance with Article 7, the states got to vote on whether they ratified or not. Who was the first state to ratify the Constitution and thereby becoming the first state of the United States of America? Delaware. Delaware is the first state. That's their nickname, the first state. Because they were the first to ratify. They ratify quickly. New Jersey, second. Both of these small states ratified before they could, they just wanted to do it quickly. Pennsylvania, Massachusetts, New Hampshire. But 2 states in particularly are very important and are not ratifying and are very late to ratify. You know one, I just told you. Virginia. And where is all these Federalist Papers being printed? New York. The 2 largest states are not ratifying. That's like where most people are. So if those 2 states don't ratify, that would mean the majority of the population of the United States did not approve it. Kind of a big deal to get those 2 states to ratify. So Hamilton, a New Yorker, goes to work in New York, and James Madison, a Virginian, he goes to work in Virginia. And they worked feverishly to convince delegates to vote for this new Constitution. But in New York, sentiment against the Constitution ran high. In fact, there was fighting in the streets that led to injuries and death over the ratification of the Constitution, guys. It's not just something that, you got to learn about in history class, ratification, the Constitution, Article 7. People were killing each other over it. Okay? When news of Virginia, in Virginia, that Virginia accepted it, that it ratified it, when that news finally reached New York, Hamilton was able to convince a majority to follow suit. And New York ratifies it with a margin of 3 votes. Very close. Now, it was kind of understood that when Virginia and New York ratified, that something was going to be added to it, or else they would rescind their ratification. And what was that thing that they wanted? They wanted a Bill of Rights. And also, we wanted to be unanimous. They wanted it to be 13 out of 13. Yeah, we only need 9. But wouldn't it look a lot better if we were together on this? And of course, 2 holdouts, North Carolina and Rhode Island, independent thinking Rhode Island, continued to hold out against ratification. They had both recently printed brand new currencies, North Carolina money and Rhode Island money, which would be unconstitutional if they ratify. They just spent all this money making money, and that they feared that the value of it would plummet in debt, would plummet because it would no longer be valid. So it took a lot of convincing to get those states to ratify, but ultimately they do. Once the Constitution is ratified, we got to start picking our leaders. And who is chosen to be the first president of the United States? George Washington. But we said we needed something extra. What was that extra thing we needed? Better be added? Bill of Rights. Okay. And we'll talk more about the Bill of Rights next time. Tomorrow, make sure you bring your Chromebooks. Make sure you bring your Chromebooks because we're going to play a game. Okay? And then next week, we're probably looking at a test Wednesday-ish, Tuesday, Wednesday-ish. Wednesday more likely.